Hello my dear friends and welcome back to another Star Wars news update. In today's video we're going to be talking about the Book of Boba Fett, the Bad Batch and more. As always my dear Mandalorians, before we dive into it, please may I ask you to hit that big red subscribe button if you've not done so, and also be sure to give that bell a good old tickle to be alerted each and every time that I post new videos. So without much further ado and without any more jibber jabber, let's dive straight into it. We're going to start with the Book of Boba Fett, where we have two pieces of big news. Ming-Na Wen, who plays Fennec Shand, recently sat down with Entertainment Tonight to discuss the Book of Boba Fett. In that interview, she revealed a couple of key pieces of information. First of all, she talks about Robert Rodriguez and how hands-on he's been as the series showrunner. She also talks about the involvement of Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. Prior to this interview, it was only assumed that the two would have some kind of involvement, but it now seems like they're both going to have directing and producing roles. Since the show is part of Favreau's Mandalorian universe, it's not too surprising, but it comes as great news nonetheless. In her own words, she added, "Jon and Dave are always there." When asked about the show itself, she emphasized the strong relationship that Boba and Fennec are going to have. But obviously guys, she didn't mean a romantic one. Ming-Na Wen also spoke about their bond as bounty hunters who've both experienced near-death experiences, and how the two characters now have a code that they follow. So some really interesting stuff indeed in this interview, and I can't wait for the show to drop in December. Now evidently, to add to this, what we got in the Bad Batch yesterday really hints that a big character is going to show up in the Book of Boba, but we're going to come back to this later. So now my dear Mandalorians, we do actually have another piece of Boba Fett news, and this one is a leaked picture for the 2021 version of the LEGO Slave One ship. The photo reveals a snapshot of a scene which we might get in the Book of Boba Fett. It's of Boba Fett himself taking a Gamorrean captive in carbonite. Now we do know that the Gamorreans are going to be present in the series since they were seen in the production poster for the show, and we also saw them in the final scene of The Mandalorian Season 2. It now seems as though Boba is going to be taking this Gamorrean to whoever has a bounty on its head. Alternatively, he's simply kidnapping Bib Fortuna's former guards to sell them for profit. We also see Din Djarin in one of these pictures, but he's not actually part of this set, so I would not get too excited about that. Nonetheless, it is rumoured that Pedro Pascal is going to feature in the series, but we're just going to have to wait and see. We're now going to move on and talk about The Acolyte, which apparently starts filming in London next February. Now I did speak about The Acolyte the other day, and it seems like the overwhelming majority of people are not interested whatsoever in the project. So what I'm going to do from now on is just report on the show when a major development happens, just like this. So let's now take a look at this article. Lucasfilm are aiming to start production on The Acolyte next February in London. The series is likely going to use the volume that's been set up in Pinewood Studios in London, following the successful use of the technology in Los Angeles for the first two seasons of The Mandalorian, as well as the Book of Boba Fett. Peyton Reed, who directed multiple episodes of The Mandalorian, is currently using the volume at Pinewood, but that's not for Star Wars, it's for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. It's believed that casting has already begun for The Acolyte, with Lucasfilm looking to cast a young woman of colour for the lead role. Both this show and Ahsoka will be the first live-action projects within the Star Wars universe to feature women of colour as the main role. The Acolyte has been multiple times described as female-driven action mystery thriller with martial art elements. Now look, I really understand a lot of the concerns that people have about the series, but as I've said, I'm willing to give it a chance. I get that what's been reported on so far has not been positive for the series, but we just don't know until we get it. This article goes on to say that Leslie Headland is serving as the showrunner for the series, a choice which many fans have problems with. Now the article then goes on to describe things we've already spoken about in the last video, which is basically that Leslie Headland wants to hire writers who have not seen Star Wars before. Now while I am going to remain optimistic about the series, or rather cautiously optimistic, a writer's room for any show is usually diverse, and while there are going to be writers who are new to the franchise, I would imagine that anything that's created, including The Acolyte, is going to have to go through Dave Filoni, because remember, he's now the creative director at Lucasfilm. But ultimately, I don't think it's right to judge the series before it's even dropped. Sometimes a fresh perspective on Star Wars is a good thing. And as I say, a writer's room is usually full of diverse people who have different takes on Star Wars and different perspectives. Now I must say, I really feel as though the press really blew everything out of proportion. The other day they used the headline that The Acolyte is going to be written by people who've never seen Star Wars. That's not entirely correct. The majority of the writers are going to be Star Wars diehards, but what Leslie Headland said is they're not only going to be diehards. It's only really going to be one or two writers who are new to the franchise, not the majority. So personally, I'm going to keep an open mind. Now finally guys, we're going to be discussing The Bad Batch. So episode 9 dropped yesterday, and as with each one, I posted my full episode breakdown. Go check it out if you've not done so already. I will be making more in-depth videos about it in the coming days. It was honestly an incredible episode with a lot of foreshadowing and dark themes. In particular, I really really loved the world building where we were taken to an off-world Kaminoan cloning facility. In the facility, we saw a Kaminoan clone fall onto Fennec Shand, as well as a Celestin. Now, I will say, while this seems significant, I don't think it has too much importance, apart from foreshadowing that eventually, I do think the Kaminoans are going to retrieve Omega. It sounds dark, but when she told Hunter to promise her that she'd never have to return to Kamino, this was just a way of signaling to the audience that she will be taken back at some point. But all in all, I doubt that she'll suffer a tragic fate, and she'll for sure be rescued, probably by her brother Boba Fett. As I say, I'll talk about this more in another video. But today, I want to highlight an interview that Brad Rao and Jennifer Corbett gave with Dork Side of the Force. In particular, Jennifer brought up the importance of the inhibitor chips, and how the series is not quite done exploring them yet. So she was asked the following question. In episode 8, Crosshair's exposure to the Iron Blast makes me curious to see where his story is going to go next. And while developing the series, was there a discussion about him following the Empire by choice rather than being forced, or if another Bad Batcher had been considered for the part? And Jennifer Corbett's answer was, that's a really good question. Early on in the development process, we knew that Crosshair was going to be the one who would be the foil of the group. But you bring up a good point, because one of the things we always try to talk about with this series, and when the Bad Batch are dealing with the regs, is that question of choice. Because with the chips, they didn't really have a say and they're conditioned to follow orders. With Order 66, we really see them execute that without any hesitation. So what the regs are going through and what Crosshair's going through is something we continue to explore throughout the season. So we don't want to give too much away, but the discussion of choice is a big topic. Now, this response heavily implies that we're about to see the beginning of clones showing regret for following orders. It sounds crazy, but in other words, Order 66 has an end goal beyond just brainwashing the clones to kill all the Jedi. I definitely think Lucasfilm have a lot in store for us in this series. It's kind of the same thing with Omega. She says she doesn't have a chip, but does she really? And if not, does she have another kind of programming that doesn't really require a chip? Now, something I am going to touch upon in a future video, probably tomorrow, is Omega's true identity. We know that she's a Jango Fett clone, but I think there's more to it. So as I say, I'll keep you guys up to date with that. Look out for my video tomorrow. But in the meantime, let me know what you thought of episode 9 in the comments down below. It was a truly amazing one. Things are really picking up in the series, and I can't wait for Friday. But that, my friends, brings us to the end of this news update. If you guys enjoyed it, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new, hit the bell, do all that good stuff down below, and if you're feeling generous, please consider becoming a patron. The link is in the description. Otherwise, I'm Star Wars Meg, wishing you all a phenomenal rest of the day, no matter where you dwell in the galaxy. Have a good one.